Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome to another NetAcad Introduction to Python course supplemental video tutorial. In this video tutorial, we're going to be talking about Lab 3.1.2.6, where we take a look at the essentials of the for loop, and specifically, we're going to tie it into counting Mississippi. In other words, if you ever, as a kid, played touch football, and you were going to rush the quarterback, sometimes you would say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then you could rush the quarterback. Or if maybe you were playing some other game where you wanted to count Mississippi, that is how you would do it. So let's dive in and take a look at the activity that we're going to be working with here. So you can see the estimated time is 5 minutes, level of difficulty very easy, and that is true. This is going to be a very straightforward activity to familiarize the learner with the for loop. And they give you some background here on the Mississippi River, as well as counting Mississippi. And so we've really been asked to produce the output you see down here at the bottom. Now, there's two ways that we could do this, and I'm actually going to be referencing both ways in this activity. So the first way I'm going to show you how to do it is how they're kind of intimating they want it done. And that's going to be using the range function. Now, there's another way that we could do this. And in fact, if you were to go into the course here, you can actually create some for loops and you can use the range, or you could do it with a while loop. Now, again, we're using a for loop, but you could achieve the same end result with a while loop as well. And so we'll see what that looks like. So let's dive in here onto the command line. You can see I've got the same code copy and pasted over here into the Integrated Development Learning Environment, or IDLE. And that's going to be of help to us, IDLE is, when we take a look at some different variations here. So all we're trying to do is count to 5 Mississippi and using a for loop to do that. And so if I was to say for I in range, and one of the nice things about IDLE is when I hit the open paren here, it's going to give me sort of a prompter so that I can look at that and say, well, what is it that I'm trying to do? Well, I want it to start at 1 Mississippi and I want it to go to 5 Mississippi. Now, you'll notice I haven't typed in the 5, and that's because, remember, when we're talking about the range function and the start and stop values, remember that the starting value, or the left-hand side of the range values that we're providing here, the left-hand side is inclusive, meaning the number 1 will be included in the count. However, on the right-hand side, it is exclusive, right? And what that means is I have to go one number beyond the number I want it to stop at. So if I want it to stop at 5, I have to provide the number 6. If I want it to stop at 7, I would have to provide the number 8. And so remember that, and that's one of the tricky things that you'll see if you're going to be going through and trying to get the PCEP certification, or just in sort of day-to-day programming. That's something to take into account. So again, if I wanted it to count from 1 to 5, my arguments would be 1, 6. Now, a question that often comes up from learners is, why is that the case? So there are some very complicated explanations out there as to why this is the case. And even the creator of the Dijkstra shortest path first algorithm, Edsger Dijkstra, actually has a paper. So if you were to search on his name, and I think you wanted to search on inclusive, exclusive, you'll probably be able to locate it. But it is a little bit complicated as to why it's exclusive on the right-hand side, but inclusive on the left-hand side. And it just makes things easier from a programming perspective. So we'll leave it at that. So that is going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say print, and let's go ahead and say I, comma, and then we'll put in here MISSISSIPPI, right? And it's basically for each number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 6, but 5, it's going to print I, which would be the number in that range that we're talking about, followed by Mississippi. Now, remember, we've imported the time function, and with the time function is going to come a method called sleep, right? And that sleep method is going to take an argument, and the argument, which is the integer we've provided 1, that's the number of seconds in between the print statements that are going to come out. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, it's going to come out, and it's going to take it a couple seconds to print that out. And then we're going to print out, and let me double check this, I think it's something like ready or not, here, oops, sorry, it's right here, right? Ready or not, here I come. So let's go ahead and print that out outside of that for loop, right? So I'm going to say print, and we'll say ready or not, here I come. All right. And so this should be our program in its entirety. So if I was to hit F5 here, and let's see what happens, click OK to save it, you can see we have 1 second in between each of the Mississippis. So even from the interactive interpreter, I could simply say import time and then for I in range, range, and we'll say 1,6. I can say print I, comma, MISSI, SSI, PPI. And we could do the same thing here just from the interactive interpreter. I could simply say time sleep. Now, what if I said 3? Well, keep in mind that what's going to happen is we're going to wait 3 seconds between each of those print statements. And so that's the effect that time has, because sometimes you may want it to basically take its time or to pause in between the output that you're seeing there on the screen. And so this is certainly one way to tackle the problem. Right now, you could also do this with a while loop. So let me put in some, and actually we'll keep that print statement there. So I could use a while loop. If I was to go back here to the course material, and you can see how while, and we've actually did this in the previous activity 3123, where with while, we can say while I is less than some value, right? So I could say while I is less than 6, and I could set I to 1, and then we would start at 1. And so let's see what that would look like. So if I was to say I equals 1, and so that means we would be starting at 1, and if I said while I is less than 6, we're going to go ahead and we're going to what do we want to print out? We're going to print out I, comma, and MISSI, SSI, PPI, and I did the double quotes there. And so we've got that there. So now here's the thing, right? With the range function, it sort of increments everything for us in that range. It goes from 1 to 2 to 3. Well, if I was to execute this right now as it is, and I can even put the time sleep in here, right? If I was to execute this the way it is, what is it going to print? Well, it's actually going to be, it's going to print indefinitely or forever because I is never being changed. So what it should print is 1 Mississippi, and then it's going to print it again and again and again and again because we never increment the value of I. So what I would want to do is come over here, and after it prints, go ahead and say I is going to get I plus 1. So then it would go from 1 to 2 to 3. So let's run this and see what we get here. And again, just sort of taking a look at another way that we could do this. And there we go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, 4, 5, and ready or not, here I come. Right? So that's another way you could approach this, but the range function is built for this, right? You can see we did it with 3 lines of code here. With the while statement, we've got to increment. First we have to declare I. We've got to increment I. And so we've got 2 additional lines of code to do the same thing we could do here with just these 3 lines of code and the range function. So definitely a little more clear when we're approaching it from that perspective. Again, just to show you that there's more than one way to do it. All right, well, that is going to wrap up this tutorial on Lab 3.1.2.6, where we took a look at the essentials of the for loop, the range function, as well as how to solve this using a while loop, and then counting Mississippi. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has helped you out a little bit, and I hope to see you in the next video.